He laughed so hard his shoulders shook. Still fat, the mat said loud enough for the entire tent to hear, loud enough to cut through the hum of equipment and the groans of the wounded. He wasn't whispering it. He wasn't ashamed. He said it like it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen, a nurse in scrubs doing her job, and somehow that was the joke. The laughter spread like a lit match finding dry grass. And she just stood there, clipboard pressed to her chest, eyeing forward, jaw tight, because she had learned a long time ago that reacting only gave men like him more fuel. But today, something in the room was about to shift. Something none of them saw coming. If this kind of story speaks to you, the kind where the right person shows up at exactly the right moment, hit that subscribe button right now and follow this story all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. Now let's get into it. Her name was Margaret Elaine Calloway, but everyone at St. Mercy General back home called her Maggie. She had been a registered nurse for 19 years. 19 years of double shifts of holding hands in the dark, of being the last face someone saw before surgery and the first voice they heard when they woke up. She had seen more pain than most people could imagine, and she had absorbed it all with steady hands and a calm voice and a heart that somehow kept refilling itself no matter how many times it was emptied. But none of that mattered here. Not today. The Forward Operating Medical Unit, what the soldiers called the FOB clinic, was a converted aircraft hangar on the edge of a military base that officially didn't appear on civilian maps. The walls were corrugated steel. The lights were fluorescent and buzzing. The smell was antiseptic in jet fuel and something else underneath it all that Maggie had learned not to name. She had volunteered for this assignment 6 weeks ago, and she had been told very clearly that it would be unlike anything she'd experienced in a hospital setting. They were right. They just hadn't told her about the people, not the soldiers. The soldiers were fine. The soldiers were, in her experience, some of the most respectful people she had ever worked with. They called her ma'am. They said thank you. One young corporal from Alabama had cried quietly when she changed his bandages, and when she told him it was okay, he said, "I know, ma'am, I just haven't been this tired in a long time." She had sat with him for 11 minutes after her shift ended, because no one should be that tired alone. No, it wasn't the soldiers, it was the civilians. There was a category of person who ended up in a place like this that Maggie had not anticipated. Men of influence, men with money or connections or both, who had found their way into proximity with military operations for reasons that were explained in vague language and signed with initials she didn't recognize. Some of them were contractors, some were consultants, some she suspected were things that didn't have clean job titles. One of them was named Derek Halton. Derek Halton was 43 years old, broad-shouldered, and possessed of the specific kind of confidence that comes not from accomplishment, but from never once having been told no. He wore civilian clothes that were just military adjacent enough to suggest authority without actually claiming any. He had a loud laugh and louder opinions, and a habit of standing in doorways so that people had to squeeze past him, a small dominance play that Maggie suspected he didn't even realize he was doing. Or maybe he did. Either way, she had been aware of him since her second day at the unit. She had managed to avoid him mostly. She was good at that. 19 years of dealing with difficult people in high-stress environments had given her a finely tuned sense for when to be somewhere else. But today she hadn't been somewhere else. Today she had been coming out of the supply corridor with a tray of medications, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done a task so many times it has become a kind of muscle memory. And she had turned the corner and walked directly into the main bay where Derek Halton was standing with 2 other men she didn't know. And the moment he saw her, his face had done that thing. That specific thing. She'd seen it before. The flicker of amusement, the slight widening of the eyes, the almost involuntary smirk that spread across the face of men who looked at her body and saw a punchline rather than a person. She was a heavy-set woman. She had been heavy-set her entire adult life. She had made peace with that fact a decade ago, or she had made something close enough to peace that she could function inside it without falling apart. But making peace with something doesn't mean it doesn't still hurt when someone throws it at you like a weapon. "Well, look at that," Derek Halton said, and his voice was too loud for the space bouncing off of the steel walls and hanging in the air. "Still fat?" The 2 men beside him laughed. One of them covered his mouth as if that made it better. The other one didn't bother. Maggie stopped walking. She didn't freeze. She didn't stumble. She just stopped. Her tray was steady. Her hands were steady. Her face, she was almost certain, was neutral. She had worked very hard over many years to develop that neutrality, and right now she was grateful for every single hour she had put into it. "Excuse me," she said, voice flat and professional. "Coming through." "Come on," Derek said, stepping slightly to the side, but not enough, not fully. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." "Nobody's thinking that," she said, and she stepped around him and kept walking. She made it 12 steps before she heard him say it again, this time to his companions, not to her directly, but pitched just loud enough that she was clearly meant to hear it. "Must eat better than the patients do." The laughter again. Maggie set the tray when it hit the nurse's station with controlled precision. She placed each item in its designated spot. She signed the medication log. She exhaled once slowly through her nose. Then she went back to work. That should have been the end of it, except the room had other people in it. She hadn't registered him immediately. That was the thing about him. He occupied space in a way that was quiet rather than loud, still rather than performative, and she had been so focused on not reacting to Derek Halton that she hadn't scanned the rest of the room the way she usually would. He was standing near the far wall beside the curtained-off bay where the unit's most sensitive patient was being kept. He was a large man, not in the way Derek Halton was large, which was the largeness of someone who had always taken up more room than they were entitled to. This was different. This was the stillness of someone who had learned a long time ago that power didn't need to announce itself. He was watching. Not the way men sometimes watched her, with that evaluating, diminishing gaze. He was watching the whole room. He was watching Derek Halton. And his expression was very, very calm in a way that, had Derek Halton been paying attention, would have made Derek Halton stop talking. Derek Halton was not paying attention. "I'm serious," Derek continued, still performing for his audience. "I don't know how she even fits through the stop." The word wasn't shouted. It wasn't sharp or aggressive in its volume. It landed in the room the way a stone lands in still water, quietly, and then everything moved in response to it. Derek Halton turned, and for the first time since Maggie had known him, his face did something other than smirk. It went careful, the way a face goes when the person wearing it suddenly realizes they have miscalculated something important. The man by the curtained bay pushed off from the wall and walked forward. He moved the way former soldiers sometimes moved, no wasted motion, no hesitation, as if the ground itself had already agreed to cooperate. He was wearing dark civilian clothes. There was nothing about his outfit that communicated rank or status, but there was something about the way the room reorganized itself around him as he walked that communicated everything. "I don't believe we've met," Derek said, recovering, because men like Derek Halton always recovered, always reached for their default register of bluster and social aggression. "You got a name?" "I do," the man said. He didn't offer it. He stopped about 4 feet from Derek, and 4 feet had never felt so much like no distance at all. "I want to ask you something." Derek's companions had gone very quiet. "Sure," Derek said, and there was something in his voice now that wasn't quite as steady as it had been 30 seconds ago. "Ask away." "What you just said to the nurse." The man's voice was perfectly level. "Did you think that was funny?" Derek blinked. I didn't ask what you were doing. I asked if you thought it was funny." The silence in the room was complete. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to buzz more quietly. "People need to lighten up," Derek said. And Maggie, who was standing at the nurse's station pretending to focus on paperwork, recognized the specific register of that sentence. The retreat into complaint, the shift from offense to victimhood, the move that men like Derek always made when the ground shifted. It was a joke. Nobody can take a month. "Look at me," the man said. And Derek looked at him. And something happened behind Derek Halton's eyes. Some calculation, some rapid assessment of what this situation actually was, as opposed to what he had assumed it was 30 seconds ago. "There's a woman standing over there," the man said, "who has been working since 6 this morning. I know this because I've been in this room since 6 this morning. I watched her come in, I watched her work. I watched her treat 3 patients before most of the people in this building had finished their first cup of coffee." He paused. The pause was deliberate. He knew exactly what he was doing with it. "And then you said what you said, and she kept working, because that's what she does, because she is better at this than either of us will ever be at anything." Derek Halton said nothing. So I'm going to ask you to do something, the man continued. I'm going to ask you to walk over there and apologize, properly. Not the kind of apology where you apologize for her reaction. The actual kind. I don't think Derek, the use of his first name delivered quietly without inflection, as a standalone statement, landed like something physical. How do you know my name? Derek asked. I know a lot of things, the man said simply. Walk over there. And here was the thing that would stick with Maggie for a long time after this day was over. Derek Halton walked over. Derek Halton, who had never in his life, as far as Maggie could tell, been made to do anything he didn't want to do. Derek Halton crossed the room and stood in front of her and said in a voice that was chastened and genuinely uncomfortable, I apologize for what I said. It was disrespectful and it was wrong. Maggie looked at him. She thought about saying several things. She had a catalog of them, actually responses she had composed over the years for exactly this kind of moment, most of which she had never gotten to deliver because the moment usually passed before it arrived. She thought about saying that apologies meant more when they came without an audience. She thought about saying that she accepted his apology even though she didn't have to and didn't owe him that. She thought about saying nothing. She said, thank you, I have patients to attend to. And she walked past him. She didn't look at the man by the wall as she passed. She didn't want to. She didn't trust herself. Because the thing about having someone step in for you, especially in a place like this, where she had spent 6 weeks building a shell of professional composure, is that it cracks something open. It finds the place where you've been quietly bleeding, and it presses on it not to hurt you, but just by virtue of acknowledging that the wound is there. She made it to the medication prep room before she had to stop and breathe. She stood in front of the counter and put both hands flat on the surface and breathed. In, out, in, out. The way she had taught patients to breathe during hard moments. The way she had learned to breathe during her own. She was fine. She was absolutely fine. She was just going to stand here for 60 seconds and be fine, and then she was going to go back out there and do her job. She was at approximately second 45 when the door opened. She straightened immediately, hands moving to the counter's supplies, making herself look occupied. Old reflex. Don't let anyone see you struggling. Don't give them that. But it wasn't anyone she needed to perform for. He stood in the doorway, and now that she was looking at him directly with no crisis to manage, she could see details she'd missed before. He was older than she'd initially thought. Late 40s, maybe? There were lines around his eyes that spoke of something more than age. His hands, she noticed, were very still, not clasped, not in his pockets, just at his sides, resting. The hands of someone who had learned to hold themselves very carefully. I wanted to check on you, he said. I'm fine, she said immediately. He looked at her for a moment, not the assessing look, not the diminishing one, just looking, like he was actually trying to see her rather than categorize her. Okay, he said. He didn't leave. You didn't have to do that, she said. She hadn't meant to say it. It came out anyway. I know, he said. I've handled things like that before. I know that too. He paused. I could see that you'd handled it. I could see exactly how you handled it and how many times you've probably had to handle something like it. Something moved across his face, not pity, something more complicated than pity. That's actually why I stepped in. Not because you couldn't handle it, because you shouldn't have to. Maggie looked at him. In 19 years of nursing, she had become an expert in reading people. She could tell the difference between pain that was physical and pain that was carried. She could tell the difference between someone who wanted help and someone who needed it but was too afraid to ask. She had learned to read the particular quality of silence that came before a person started crying and the different quality that came before a person shut down entirely. She read this man now the way she read all of them, and what she found surprised her. He was exhausted. Not the surface exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept well. Something deeper. The kind of exhaustion that settles into a person when they've been carrying something heavy for a very long time and have forgotten what it feels like to put it down. Are you all right? She asked, and she asked it the way she asked patients, not as a pleasantry, but as a real question with real interest in the real answer. He blinked, like he hadn't expected the direction of that. I've been better, he said after a moment. Is there something I can help you with, medically, I mean? No, he almost smiled. Almost. I don't know why I came back here. I wanted to make sure you were okay. That's all. I told you I was fine. You said the words, he agreed. That's a different thing. She stared at him. And then because she was Maggie Calloway, and she had been doing this for 19 years, and she knew a moment of honesty when she was standing in one, she said, "It's not the first time someone said something like that to me. It probably won't be the last. I've learned to put it somewhere. The things people say, I put them somewhere that I don't have to look at every day." Where? The question surprised her, not a challenge, genuine curiosity. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Somewhere that must be getting pretty full by now." He was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said, "I know that place." She looked at him, really looked at him, and she thought she didn't know why she thought this, but she thought it clearly and without ceremony. This is someone who has been through something. Not around something, through it. "I don't know your name," she said. "Nikolai," he said. She nodded. "Maggie." "I know," he said. "I heard them use it this morning when you came in." She wasn't sure how she felt about that, about being observed in the way he had apparently been observing, except it hadn't been surveillance. She understood the difference even if she couldn't have articulated it precisely in that moment. He had been watching the room the way someone watches when they are responsible for something in the room, the way she watched her patients, making sure everyone was still breathing. "Who are you responsible for?" she asked. "In there." She gestured toward the curtained bay. His expression shifted. Not dramatically, just a small adjustment the way a camera adjusts its focus. "What makes you ask that?" "You've been standing next to that bay all morning," she said. "You're not military, you're not staff, but you're not here for yourself either. So you're here for someone else." He looked at her for a long moment. "His name is Anton," he said finally. "He's 26 years old. He got here 3 days ago." She nodded, slow, professional. "I'll be assigned to his care rotation starting tomorrow," she said. "I was going to review his chart this afternoon." "He doesn't trust medical staff easily," Nikolai said. There was something in his voice, not a warning exactly. More like he was giving her information that he thought she would need and use well. "He's been through," he stopped. "It's in the chart, some of it, not all of it." "They'd never put all of it in the chart," she said. "No," he agreed, "they don't." There was a pause, not uncomfortable, the kind of pause that exists between two people who have recognized something in each other and are figuring out what to do with that recognition. "Thank you," Maggie said, "for what you did. I don't—" She stopped for found the honest words instead of the deflecting ones. "It meant something, even if I wasn't going to show that it did." He nodded once. A small movement, but a complete one, the way some people nod when they understand something that doesn't need elaboration. "I'll let you get back to it," he said. "Yeah," she said. He turned to go. "Nikolai," she said. He stopped. "Whatever you're carrying," she said, "the thing that's making you look the way you look, you should find somewhere to put that down too." He didn't turn around right away. He stood very still for a moment, and she watched his shoulders the way they held the slight adjustment as she said the words, as if something had been rearranged by them. "Working on it," he said quietly, and he walked back out. Maggie stood in the medication prep room for another full minute. Then she picked up the chart she needed, tucked it under her arm, and went back to work. Because that was what she did. That had always been what she did. She went back to work, and she did it well, and she let the work be the thing that held her together when everything else was trying to pull her apart. But something had changed in the room. She could feel it when she walked back through the main bay. The quality of the space was different. Derek Halton and his companions were gone. The other staff moved around her with the same efficiency as always, calling questions across the room, checking monitors, doing the 10,000 small things that kept people alive. Nothing had changed on the surface, but she could see Nikolai at the edge of her peripheral vision, back by the curtained bay, and there was something in the way he stood now that was different from before. Fractionally different, but she was trained to notice the fractional differences. The held-in way he had been standing earlier, that locked quality, had shifted by a degree or two. The way a locked joint shifts when some of the tension goes out of it. She didn't look directly at him. She didn't need to. She reviewed 3 charts, checked 2 IV lines, administered 1 round of evening medications, and wrote 2 pages of nursing notes. She did all of this with the same steady efficiency she had been building for 19 years. And at the back of her mind, quiet and persistent, ran a question she hadn't asked and didn't know yet how to ask, not about Derek Halton, who was already categorized and filed in the place she kept people like that, the place that was getting full, about Nikolai, about the thing in his face that she recognized without being able to name, about the exhaustion that ran too deep for sleep to fix, about a 26-year-old named Anton who didn't trust medical staff and who was behind a curtain in a building that didn't appear on civilian maps, about what it meant that a man who occupied space the way Nikolai occupied space, calm certain the still center of whatever room he was in, had come to check on her, not as a performance, not to be seen doing a kind thing, just to check. She had been a nurse for 19 years, and she had learned to read people, and she was reading this one now across the room and through the blur of her professional concentration, and what she was reading was, something is happening here that is larger than today. She didn't know yet what to do with that, but she filed it. In the other place, the one that was not getting full, the one she returned to quietly in the small hours of difficult nights when she needed to remember why any of this mattered. She filed it there, and she kept working. The next morning came the way mornings did at the FOB clinic, without ceremony and without mercy. The lights clicked on at 5:45. The overnight staff handed off to the day rotation with clipped sentences and tired eyes. Equipment was checked, charts were reviewed, coffee was consumed in quantities that would have alarmed a cardiologist. Maggie arrived at 6:02, which was 2 minutes later than usual, and she noticed that she noticed. She noticed because the curtain bay in the far corner of the main room was the first thing she looked at when she walked through the door, and she noticed that he was already there, already standing, already watching the room with that particular quality of attention that she had filed away the night before and found herself retrieving in the first moment of the new day. Nikolai looked at her when she walked in, one brief direct look, then he looked away. She went to the nurse's station, clocked in, and pulled Anton Voss's chart. The chart was a careful document. She could tell reading it that someone had made deliberate choices about what to include and what to leave as negative space, the medical equivalent of a redacted file. His vitals were documented cleanly. His physical injuries were cataloged with clinical precision: 2 fractured ribs, a right shoulder dislocation that had been partially addressed in a field environment before he reached the unit lacerations on both forearms. He was 26 years old. His blood type was O negative. Under psychological history, someone had written, history of medical trauma, recommend to slow approach patient, has expressed distrust of institutional care settings. That was it. That was all. Maggie read it twice and set the chart down. She had treated patients like Anton before. Not exactly like him, she suspected. There was no exactly like him, but patients who had arrived at her care, already defended, already braced, already wearing their distrust-like armor they had learned they couldn't take off. She knew how to work with that. She had learned over years that the worst thing you could do with a patient like that was try to dismantle the armor directly. You didn't ask them to trust you. You just showed up. You showed up consistently, and you did your job well, and you let the trust, if it came, come on its own terms. She picked the chart back up and walked toward the curtain bay. She was 6 feet from the curtain when Nikolai stepped slightly to the side, not blocking her, not challenging her, but present. A small repositioning that was also a question. "I'm the nurse assigned to his rotation starting today," she said, keeping her voice low and professional. "I read his chart." "He knows," Nikolai said, equally quiet. "I told him this morning." "How is he?" Nikolai's jaw shifted slightly. "He had a rough night. Pain level. He rated it a 4, but I'd put it at a 7 or 8. A pause. "He doesn't like to admit pain." "Most of them don't," she said. She looked at the curtain, then back at Nikolai. "Has he eaten?" "Some, not enough," she nodded. "I'm going to introduce myself. Keep it brief. No procedures today, I just want him to see my face." Nikolai looked at her for a moment. Something in his expression, a small recalibration. Like he had expected an argument he wasn't going to get. "Okay," he said. She pulled the curtain aside and stepped in. Anton Voss was sitting up in the hospital bed with the posture of someone who had decided that lying down was a position of vulnerability and had refused to allow himself that. He was young, genuinely young, the kind of young that 30-year-olds looked at and felt the distance of, with dark circles under his eyes and a set to his jaw that Maggie recognized immediately as the "I dare you" expression. The expression that patients wore when they had been disappointed by medical settings enough times to arrive at her already angry about it. She didn't react to the expression. She just walked to the side of the bed and stood at a comfortable distance, not hovering, not retreating, and said, "My name is Maggie. I'll be one of the nurses on your care team starting today. I'm not going to do anything to you right now. I just wanted to put a face to the name so you're not dealing with a stranger every time someone comes through that curtain." Anton looked at her with the flat, measuring gaze of someone who had heard a lot of introductions and trusted none of them. "Nikolai told me you were coming," he said. "Good," she said, then no surprises. A beat. "He said you were—" Anton stopped. Rephrased. "He said you were straightforward." "I try to be." She glanced at his chart without making it a clinical moment. "Your shoulder is going to need a proper evaluation today. Not by me, by the orthopedic physician. You can say no if you're not ready, but I'd recommend it because the longer it goes without being properly addressed, the harder the recovery gets." Something moved across Anton's face. Not softening exactly. More like the slight lowering of a held breath. "How long?" "The eval, 20 minutes, maybe 30. Depends on what he finds." "And after?" "Depends on what he finds," she said again, and she said it honestly rather than reassuringly because she had a feeling this was a young man who could tell the difference and would not forgive the latter. "But I'll be here for all of it. You'll have a face in the room that you've already seen before." Anton looked at the curtain the direction Nikolai was on the other side of, then back at her. "Okay," he said, and the word was small, but it was there. "Okay," she said. "I'll be back at 9 for the physician's arrival. Get some food in you before then." She moved toward the curtain. "Nurse," Anton said. She stopped. "You're not going to ask me how I'm feeling?" She turned back. "Do you want me to—" He blinked, like the question had surprised him. "No," he said after a moment. "Then I'm not going to ask," she said, and she stepped out through the curtain. Nikolai was exactly where she'd left him. His eyes went immediately to her face, reading her the way she read patients, she realized, looking for information. He said, "Okay," she said quietly. Something happened in Nikolai's face that was too fast for her to fully catch. Relief, maybe. The kind that shows up as a single frame between tension and neutral and then disappears again before it can be named. He stopped, cleared his throat. "That's the first okay he's given in 3 days. She looked at him. The exhaustion was still there deep in the set of his face and the way he held himself. "When did you last sleep?" she asked. "I sleep." "That's not what I asked." His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, but in the direction of one. "You're very direct." "You told a 26-year-old that about me this morning," she said. "I figure you already knew." "Yeah," he said, "I did." He looked toward the curtain. 3 days, he said. "He's been in there 3 days, and every time someone walks through that curtain, he paused. "He goes somewhere in himself that's hard to reach." He was in a facility before this, a medical facility. It wasn't, "You don't have to explain." "I want to," he said, in the certainty of it, the quiet simplicity of, "I want to land it differently than she expected. I want you to understand him, because you're going to be the one in there with him. And what happens in those 30 minutes today matters more than I can explain in the time we have right now. Tell me what you can in the time we have." He told her, not everything. She could feel the shape of everything around the edges of what he said, the way you can feel walls in a dark room without touching them. But what he gave her was enough. Anton Voss had been through a situation, he didn't name it precisely, that had placed him in the care of people who had used that care as a mechanism of control. She didn't ask for specifics. She didn't need them. She had worked in enough difficult places to understand that some patients arrived carrying the residue of people who had treated their bodies as tools rather than as belonging to someone. "He trusts you," she said when Nikolai finished. "He trusts me," Nikolai confirmed. "Which is, it took time. It took a lot of time and a lot of being wrong and a lot of having to go back and say I was wrong. But yes, he trusts me." "That's important," she said. "That's actually the most important thing in that chart, and it's not in the chart." Nikolai looked at her. That look again, the one that was actually looking. You're very good at this, he said. My teen years, she said. You get good or you burn out. There's not much in between. She checked her watch. I need to prep for 9 o'clock. Are you going to be in the room for the evaluation? If he wants me there, he'll want you there, she said. She was already moving. Make sure he eats something. She heard him just barely say yes, ma'am. She almost smiled. She was at the nurse's station for 14 minutes before Derek Halton walked back into the building. She felt the change in the room before she saw him. The specific quality of attention that shifts when a disruptive element re-enters a space, the way certain conversations pause, the way people reposition slightly, the collective recalibration of a room that is deciding how to handle something. She looked up. Derek was moving with the deliberate ease of a man who had decided overnight that yesterday had been a misunderstanding, and that the appropriate response to a misunderstanding was to act as though it hadn't happened. He was wearing a different shirt. His posture was reassembled, the shoulders back, the chin, up, the specific architecture of a man who had felt small and was compensating for it by making himself large again. He walked past the nurse's station without looking at her. She went back to her chart. But she was aware in the way she was always aware of things that mattered, of the shift in the room. The two men he had been with yesterday were not with him now. He was alone, moving toward the briefing area at the back of the space where the civilian consultants and contractors gathered for their morning coordinates. She tracked his movement without looking at it and then let it go. Because it wasn't her problem and she had enough problems that were actually hers. 9 o'clock came. The orthopedic physician, the brusque man named Carver, who communicated entirely in medical shorthand and expected everyone to keep up, arrived at 8:57 and spent 3 minutes reading Anton's chart with the focused intensity of someone diffusing something. Maggie went to Anton's curtain at 8:59. Anton was sitting up, same posture as earlier. She noticed, eaten the tray showed clear evidence of someone who had addressed the food without enthusiasm but with function. Nikolai was standing by the wall, which she noted and approved of, in the room but not between Anton and the door, present but not occupying. Doctor, Carver is here, she said. Ready? Anton's jaw tightened, then released. Yeah, he said. I'm going to stay at this side of the bed the whole time, she said. If anything happens that you want to stop, you say stop and we stop. No questions, no discussion. Just stop. Anton looked at her. Something in the I dare you expression cracked very slightly, just a hairline fracture. Okay, he said. Dr. Carver came in and Maggie stayed at Anton's left side and the evaluation proceeded. It was 34 minutes and there were 2 moments in those 34 minutes where Anton went very still in the way Nikolai had described somewhere else behind his eyes. And both times Maggie said his name quietly and without alarm. And both times he came back, and the third time the physician reached for him, she put her hand on Anton's arm. First, just briefly, just a grounding touch, and he didn't go away at all. When it was over, when Dr. Carver had given his assessment and his instructions in medical shorthand that Maggie immediately translated for Anton in actual language. When the physician had gone, the curtain bay was very quiet for a moment. Then Anton said to no one in particular, to the middle distance, It wasn't as bad as he thought it was going to be. Nikolai from the wall, no. She kept talking, Anton said, as if explaining it to himself. The whole time. She just kept talking. Yes, Nikolai said. He was looking at Maggie. I want to do the whole story, she said to Anton, beginning to make notes. Your whole medical picture from the beginning. Not today, but soon when you're ready. She looked up from the chart. And when you decide you're ready, you tell me. Don't let anyone tell you you're ready. You decide. Anton stared at her. Why? Because it's your body, she said simply. It's always been your body. It belongs to you. Not to a facility, not to a chart, not to a treatment plan. You and I work for you, not the other way around. The silence that followed was the kind that had weight. Then Anton said low and rough, and like the words were coming from somewhere he'd kept locked. Nobody's ever said it like that before. Well, she said, finishing her note and capping her pen. Now somebody has. She walked out through the curtain and nearly ran into Nikolai, who had followed her out without her hearing him move. She stopped. He was closer than she expected, and the expression on his face was something she hadn't seen there before, unguarded in a way the rest of him wasn't. Open in the way that faces get when something has moved them before they could arrange themselves against it. Thank you, he said, and the two words carried weight that two words rarely carried. Don't thank me, she said. That's just nursing. No, he said with quiet certainty, that is not just nursing. She held his gaze for a moment, then looked away because holding it felt like standing too close to something warm when you had been cold for a long time and weren't sure you were allowed to get warm. Your turn, she said. He blinked. What? I told you yesterday you needed to put something down. She crossed her arms, not defensively, the way she crossed her arms when she was about to say something true. And I've been watching you for, she checked the clock on the wall, 3 hours and 14 minutes this morning, and the thing you're carrying has not gotten any lighter. So, when was the last time you slept a full night? Maggie, I'm the nurse, she said. Answer the question. He looked at her, a long look. The kind of look where a person is deciding whether to keep the door closed or to allow that someone has already seen what's behind it anyway, and there's no real point in pretending otherwise. Before Anton got here, he said finally, 3 days ago. She didn't say anything, she just looked at him. There's a cot in the family rest area, she said after a moment. It's not comfortable, but it's horizontal. I can set a 2-hour block where I check on him, and you can get 2 uninterrupted hours. I can't leave him. He's not alone, she said. He'll be with me, and I am better at this than you are. Something in his face shifted surprise, then something that was almost against his will amusement. You're not wrong, he said. I know I'm not wrong. She held out her hand. Give me your phone number. I'll text you immediately if anything changes. He looked at her outstretched hand, at her face, back at her hand. He gave her his number. 2 hours, she said. I'll call you at 11:30. He walked toward the family rest area and she watched him go, and she thought with the clinical part of her mind that was always running, always assessing, that he walked differently without the watchfulness, like a person who had been allowed just briefly to stop guarding. She went back to the nurse's station. She charted Anton's evaluation, noted his pain levels, coordinated his medication schedule with the physician's instructions, and she had just completed the last line of the nursing note when she became aware with a particular peripheral attention that experience had sharpened in her that Derek Halton was not in the briefing area anymore. She looked up. He was at the other end of the nurse's station, standing with one of the younger administrative staff, a man named Reyes 25 Ernest, who had been at the unit for 4 months and still believed in the essential reasonableness of everyone he encountered. Derek was talking to Reyes in a low, friendly voice, and Reyes was nodding, and whatever was being said too quietly for her to catch. But she caught the way Reyes glanced in her direction, and then back at Derek. And then the specific way Reyes's expression tightened slightly, the expression of someone who has just been handed information they're not sure what to do with. She waited. Reyes came to her 7 minutes later, standing slightly uncomfortable in his own skin, the way young people looked when they had been made to do something they weren't sure was right. Hey, Maggie, he looked down at the counter. Derek, the consultant Halton, he was asking about the patient in Bay 4, about his chart, about who was assigned to his care. She kept her face very still. What did you tell him? Nothing specific. I said it was classified access. Reyes looked up at her, but he was pretty pointed about it. He said he had authorization from someone in logistics to review the care protocols of any patient on the unit. Did he show you anything in writing? Reyes hesitated. No. She nodded once. Thank you for telling me, she said. You did the right thing. Reyes looked relieved in the way people looked when someone older and more certain confirmed that they hadn't made a mistake. He went back to his station. Maggie sat very still at hers. Derek Halton, asking about Anton Voss, a man who had 24 hours ago been laughing at her weight in the middle of a public room and was now quietly inquiring about a patient who by every indicator she had been able to read was being protected from something. From someone, maybe. She thought about Nikolai, about the way he watched the room, about the care he had taken to position himself between Anton and anyone he hadn't already assessed. She thought about what Nikolai had said, it's not all in the chart. She pulled out her phone and typed a message before she had fully decided to send it. Then she looked at the message, read it back once, sent it. The reply came in 40 seconds. Not the 2-hour block she had given him. 40 seconds. Nikolai, on my way back. Don't let anyone near Bay 4. She looked at the message, at the speed of it, at what the speed of it told her. She stood up, walked to Bay 4's curtain, and positioned herself in front of it in a way that was professional and deliberate, and communicated to anyone paying attention that this was not a curtain that was going to be opened by anyone she didn't approve of. Derek Halton walked back into the main room 30 seconds later. He saw her immediately, and this time the smirk was gone. In its place was something cooler, more calculated. The expression of a man who had revised his assessment of a situation and was now looking at her not as a joke, but as an obstacle. She met his eyes, did not look away, held the position. The room between them was approximately 20 feet, and it was very quiet, and Maggie Calloway had been standing between patience and harm for 19 years, and she was not going to move. Derek Halton did not move toward her, not right away. He stood at the far end of the room and looked at her the way a man looks at something that has suddenly become more complicated than he budgeted for, and Maggie held her position in front of Bay 4's curtain and looked back at him, and the 20 feet between them was very loud in its silence. Then he smiled. Not the broad, performative laugh from yesterday. This was smaller and more deliberate, the smile of a man who had decided on a strategy. "Nurse," he said, walking toward her at a relaxed, unhurried pace. "I just need to check on the patient in there. Routine oversight. I have authorization." "Show it to me," she said. He kept walking. "I don't answer to nursing staff." "In this unit," she said, "anyone who wants access to a patient answers to nursing staff. That's protocol. Show me your authorization." He stopped 4 feet from her, close enough to be a pressure. She didn't step back. "You're going to want to move," he said quietly. "I'm going to want to do a lot of things today," she said. "Moving isn't on the list." His jaw tightened. The smile stayed, but it was costing him something now. She could see that. The effort of maintaining it when she wasn't cooperating with the performance. "I know people here," he said. "People above your pay grade." "Most people are above my pay grade," she said. "Still need to see the authorization." He leaned slightly forward, just slightly. The doorway moved. The dominance play she'd clocked on day 2. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. You're the one who keeps talking instead of producing a document," she said. "Seems like the difficulty is on your end." His eyes changed. The smile fell all the way off, and that was when the door opened. Nikolai walked through at a pace that was not running, but also was not walking in any casual sense of the word. He covered the distance between the door and the nurse's station in seconds, and he was reading the room the whole time, reading it the way Maggie had watched him read rooms, the rapid, thorough assessment of a man who had spent years understanding situations at a glance. He landed beside Maggie between her and Derek without appearing to rush the process of getting there. Derek looked at him. "Halton," Nikolai said, the single word, the name as a statement. "Kovac," Derek replied. The name landed in Maggie's chest like a dropped stone, not because it changed anything immediate, because it told her something that they knew each other, that this was not a chance collision between strangers, but something older, something that had history in it. "You look like a man with somewhere else to be," Nikolai said. "I look like a man doing his job," Derek said, and the bluster was back, reshaped and restructured, borrowing against whatever history existed between them. "Which I have authorization to do, and you can check." "I checked," Nikolai said. 23 minutes ago before you woke up and decided to come back in here." A beat. "Your logistics authorization is for supply chain review. Nothing patient-related. Nothing in this wing." Derek's face went very still. "There's been an update." "There hasn't," Nikolai said simply. "I would know." The two men looked at each other. There was a full conversation happening in that look, years of it compressed into about 8 seconds, and Maggie could feel the edges of it without being able to read the center. Whatever Nikolai Kovac and Derek Halton were to each other, the relationship had tilted. She could see Derek recalculating the way she had seen him recalculate yesterday, searching the situation for leverage and finding the math coming up wrong. "This isn't over," Derek said. He said it to Nikolai, not to her, as if she had ceased to exist as a relevant variable the moment Nikolai walked in. "It is for today," Nikolai said. Derek held his gaze for 3 more seconds. Then he turned and walked back toward the briefing area, and the room breathed again, and Maggie let her shoulders drop exactly 1/4 of an inch and then brought them back up because she was still on duty and she could fall apart later. Nikolai turned to her. "Are you all right?" "I've been better," she said. The callback to what he'd said to her yesterday was deliberate, and she saw the small flash of recognition in his face. "Fair," he said. "How long was he at that curtain?" "He wasn't at the curtain. He was at the nurse's station asking Reyes questions. I got to the curtain before he did." Nikolai looked at her for a moment. "You didn't call me until he was already pushing." "I called you as soon as I had something concrete. Next time you see him heading toward this wing—" "I know," she said. "Maggie." "I said I know Nikolai." She looked at him steadily. "I've been keeping people safe in rooms like this for a long time. I didn't need the reminder. I needed the backup, and I asked for it. That's what I did." He closed his mouth, looked at her with that open, unguarded expression. Then he nodded. "Yeah," he said, "you did." She turned back to the nurse's station and sat down and picked up her pen because she needed something to hold. "Tell me about you and Halton." "That's all I need. Tell me what I need to know," she said. "None, must everything. What I need, because he is clearly not just a contractor asking routine questions, and whatever he wants with Anton is clearly not routine oversight, and I cannot protect a patient from something I don't understand." The pause was short. Nikolai sat down across from her. He looked at his hands for a moment, then up at her. "Derek Halton works for people who are interested in Anton for reasons that have nothing to do with his well-being," he said. "Anton's family has significant resources. Legal resources, financial resources, the kind of resources that make certain people very interested in where Anton is, in what condition he's in." "His family," she said. Are they the ones who—" "His father is," Nikolai said quietly. "Yes." She absorbed that, set it in the right place. "And Halton is working for the father. For someone connected to the father. The specific chain is longer and less clean than I can map out right now." He looked at her directly. "The short version is that Anton is not here by accident. He's here because this is one of the few places I could get him to where certain people would have difficulty accessing him. The unit's classification makes it complicated for civilian parties to assert legal authority over patients." "But not impossible," she said. "Not impossible," he agreed. "If Halton gets documentation together, real documentation or manufactured documentation, and both are options he has access to, he could potentially argue a right of review that would force a transfer." She sat with that. "A transfer would be bad. A transfer would be catastrophic," he said, and the word catastrophic came out flat and certain, and she believed it completely. "Then we make sure he doesn't get the documentation together." He looked at her. "That's not your problem to solve." "Anton is my patient," she said. "His safety is my problem by definition. This is outside the scope of Nikolai." She set her pen down. "Stop telling me what's outside my scope and tell me what I can do." He was quiet. Then, "Right now, the most important thing is continuity of presence. If Anton has consistent, documented ongoing care from qualified medical staff, it is significantly harder to argue for a transfer on medical grounds. The care record becomes a legal instrument." He paused. "Which means your nursing notes matter more than you might think." She looked at him. "My nursing notes are already thorough. Make them more thorough. Define more thorough. Every interaction, every medication, every pain level, every meal, every conversation. The more comprehensive your documentation, the stronger the argument that this patient is receiving appropriate, consistent, high-quality care and does not require any change of facility or oversight. You want me to build an evidentiary record. I want you to take exceptionally good care of your patient," he said carefully. "Everything else is incidental." She held his gaze, read him. He was asking for something specific and was framing it in the cleanest way he could, not to deceive her, she thought, but because the cleaner framing was also the true one. Taking exceptional care of Anton and building an evidentiary record were not in conflict. They were the same action. "How long have you been doing this?" she asked. "Doing what?" "Protecting people," she said. "Not just Anton, in general." "How long has this been the thing you do?" He was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. "A long time," he said finally. "Does it ever—" She stopped, rephrased. "Does anyone ever protect you?" The question sat between them. She watched it land. Watched the thing that moved across his face, not the controlled, careful thing, but the underneath thing, the real thing. That's not how it works, he said. For me. Why not? Because the people who need protecting need someone who is, he stopped. Unprotected, she said quietly. He looked at her, something in his face was very still. Someone who has nothing to lose, he said. That's how it started, a long time ago. Someone needed help, and I was the only one available, and I had nothing that could be used against me. And now, he didn't answer. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her pen and went back to her chart and said without looking up, "You should go back to Anton. I'll be in at 2 o'clock for the afternoon medication round." He stood. She could feel him standing there for a moment before he moved, that particular quality of a person who has more to say and is choosing not to say it yet. "Maggie," he said. She looked up. "Thank you," he said, "for the question. Nobody asked me that." She looked back at her chart. "Somebody should," she said. He went. She sat for 3 minutes without writing a single word. Then she wrote the most thorough nursing note she had ever written in 19 years, and she dated and timed every line, and she signed it with a hand that was perfectly steady. At 1:47, 13 minutes before she was due at Anton's Bay, the overhead intercom clicked on, and a voice she didn't recognize said in the clipped cadence of someone reading from a prepared text, "All personnel be advised. A civilian oversight review has been requested for patient in Bay 4. Review team will arrive at 1400 hours. All medical staff on the unit please have documentation prepared for review." The room stopped. Not literally. Equipment still beeped. Monitors still ran. But every person Maggie could see had gone very still, in the way people went still when something unexpected had just crashed through the wall of a normal workday. She looked at the clock. 1:47, 13 minutes. She was on her feet before she knew she had decided to stand. She crossed to Bay 4 and pulled the curtain aside, and Anton was already sitting up straighter, already wearing the "I dare you's" expression, already braced because he had heard the intercom and he understood what it meant, even if no one had explained it to him. "You heard," she said. "Who is it?" he asked. His voice was flat, controlled in the way that things were controlled when the alternative was the opposite of controlled. "I don't know yet. I'm finding out." "Nikolai, I'm getting him." "Anton, look at me." She waited until he did. "Butting is happening in this bay that I do not approve. You understand me? Nothing. Not today." He looked at her. The hairline fracture from this morning was wider now. The "I dare you" expression, holding but cracking at the edges, letting something younger and more frightened show through. "They can't make me go," he said. "Can they?" She kept her voice steady. "Not today. Today I need you to let me do what I do. Can you do that?" He swallowed. "Yeah." She went back out, and Nikolai was already there. He must have heard the intercom from the rest area, must have been moving before it finished, because he was in front of her with his phone in his hand and an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Not the calm, not the careful. Something harder and faster underneath. "2 people, he said, looking at his phone screen. "Halton filed the request 40 minutes ago. He had it prepared before he walked through that door this morning." "He already knew you'd block him," she said. "He came in to confirm I was here," Nikolai said, "to confirm that the situation was what he thought it was and the request was worth filing." His jaw was tight. "I walked into it." "Stop," she said. "That's done. What do we do in 13 minutes? "I need to make a call." He was already dialing. "The unit commander needs to be made aware before they arrive. If Hargrove gets to the door first and doesn't know the context, I'll handle the documentation on my end," she said. "I'll have everything printed and organized. If they want to review care records, I will give them the most complete, most unassailable care record they have ever been handed." He looked at her while the phone rang against his ear. "You printed it already," he said. Not a question. "I had a feeling your 13 minutes started earlier than mine," she said. He held her gaze for one moment, something in it that she didn't try to read right then because there wasn't time, and then the call connected and he turned away, his voice dropping into a register she hadn't heard from him yet, quiet and precise, and carrying the weight of someone who was done asking. She went to the printer. She had Anton's complete care record in her hands at 1:53, 7 minutes. She organized it by date, by time, by system, vital signs, pain assessments, medication, administration, nursing notes, Physician orders, all of it cross-referenced and tabbed in the way she organized things when she needed them to be undeniable. Reyes appeared at her elbow. Maggie, they're the review team just checked in at the gate. They'll be here in 5. Thank you, Reyes. Is Anton going to be? Yes, she said. And she said it like the answer to a question she had already decided on. She walked to the unit commander's office, knocked twice and walked in before she was invited to, which she had never done in 6 weeks at this unit, and Commander Hargrove looked up from his desk with the expression of a man who recognized urgency when it walked through his door, more uninvited. Sir, she said, I need 4 minutes of your time before that review team arrives. He looked at the documentation in her hands, at her face. Sit down, Calloway. She sat down. She talked for 4 minutes. She put the care record on his desk with both hands, and she said every relevant thing she had in the clearest possible order, and she left out nothing that mattered. When she finished, Hargrove was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up his phone. Get me the JAG officer on duty, he said into it. He looked at Maggie over the desk. You're going to wait here. She waited. At 2:03, 3 minutes after the review team had been cleared at the gate, JAG Lieutenant Chen walked into the unit commander's office, and Maggie handed her an identical copy of the care record, and Chen read the first 3 pages with the focused attention of someone who understood immediately what she was looking at. This is comprehensive, Chen said. Yes, Maggie said. Who built this? I did, Maggie said. 19 years of practice. Chen looked at her, a quick assessing look. Then she almost smiled. Stay available, she said. I may need you in the room. I'll be at Bay 4, Maggie said. She walked back into the main room, and Nikolai was waiting outside Bay 4 with his phone at his side and an expression that had reorganized itself back into the calm. But she could see the undercurrent of it. Oh, now the effort. The cost of the stillness. Hargrove's aware, she asked. He's aware. Chen. Already reading. He exhaled, just once, just slightly, the closest thing to relief she had seen from him since this morning. You move fast, he said. 19 years, she said. 4th time this week I've said that. Might start being my favorite sentence, he said quietly. She looked at him. He was standing close, not inappropriately close, but close in the way that 2 people stood when they had been through something together, and the something had not finished yet. They're going to try to push, she said, the review team. They're going to come in with language about family rights and medical consultation, and they're going to make it sound routine. I know. I need you to let me be in front of that, she said. When they come to the Bay, I need to be the one who responds to the medical questions, not you. He looked at her. Something moved in his face. Why? Because they'll argue with you, she said. They'll try to reframe it as a personal interest issue, your relationship with Anton, your role in his care, the absence of a formal clinical relationship. They'll use that to undermine your standing. She held his gaze. They cannot use that against me. I'm his nurse. I'm on the rotation. My standing is documented and dated and printed in triplicate in the JAG officer's hands right now. He was very still. You're protecting me, he said, like the concept was something he was encountering at an unfamiliar angle. I'm using my position strategically, she said. Same thing you've been doing since yesterday morning. He looked at her for a long moment. Maggie. Don't, she said, not right now. Let's get through today. After today, he said. It wasn't a question, but it held the shape of one. She looked at him 1 more second longer than she needed to. After today, she agreed. On Amidst. The door at the far end of the room opened. 2 people walked in, one in civilian business attire, one in a suit that was too pressed for a field unit, carrying a document bag, and wearing the specific expression of people who had arrived expecting the work to be easy. They looked at the room, at the nurse's station, at the JAG officer who had materialized near the commander's office. Then at Maggie, standing in front of Bay 4, documentation in hand, looking back at them with 19 years of steady, unblinking professional composure. The one in the suit looked at the other one. Then he opened his document bag. And Maggie thought very clearly, very quietly, come on then, and did not move a single inch. The man in the suit introduced himself as Gerald Pierce, and he said the word representative in the way that people said it when they wanted you to understand it meant something more than it appeared to on the surface. His colleague was a woman named Sandra Lim, quieter, sharper-eyed, carrying a tablet and a legal pad, in the specific stillness of someone whose job was to observe and record rather than to speak. Pierce did the talking. Lim watched everything. Maggie watched Lim watching and made a note of it in the back of her mind. "We're here for a routine patient welfare review," Pierce said, addressing the room in a voice that was designed to communicate that this was simple and procedural, and anyone who made it complicated was the one creating the problem. "We have documentation from the family of Anton Voss authorizing a review of his current care status and a formal consultation regarding transfer options." "You can give that documentation to Lieutenant Chen," Maggie said. She kept her voice level and professional. Not confrontational, just clear. "She's the JAG officer on duty, and she's handling the authorization review." Pierce looked at her, then at Chen, who was standing with Hargrove near the briefing area, with the kind of relaxed authority that was not relaxed at all. He looked back at Maggie. "I'm not here to deal with military legal staff. I'm here to see the patient. And the patient's care team will be happy to facilitate that review," Maggie said, "once Lieutenant Chen has confirmed your documentation is in order. This is a civilian matter." "This is a military medical unit," Hargrove said from across the room. His voice carried without being raised. "On a military installation under military jurisdiction, Lieutenant Chen will review your documentation. That's how this works." Pierce's jaw moved. He looked at the document bag. He looked at Lim. Something passed between them that Maggie couldn't read, but could feel a recalibration, a small tactical retreat to regroup. "Fine," Pierce said. "We'll do the documentation review." He walked toward Chen. Lim stayed where she was. Maggie watched Lim watching Bayfor's curtain, and she thought the documentation review is not the point. The documentation review is the distraction. She took 3 steps to her left and positioned herself more directly in front of the curtain, and Lim's eyes moved to her face, and Maggie met them, and the 2 women looked at each other with the clear mutual understanding of 2 people who had each correctly identified what the other one was doing. Lim said nothing. She made a note on her legal pad. Maggie stayed where she was. At 2:17, Pierce finished his initial exchange with Chen and walked back across the room with the expression of a man who had expected an obstacle to yield and had found it more structural than anticipated. "The documentation is in order," he said to Maggie, because she was apparently the obstacle he'd decided to address directly. "We have legal standing to conduct this review." "What kind of review?" Maggie asked. "Patient welfare, current condition, appropriateness of the care environment." "I can tell you his current condition," she said. "I'm his nurse. I have his complete care record, which has already been provided to the JAG officer. What specifically would you like to know?" "I'd like to speak to the patient directly." "That's the patient's decision," Maggie said. "Not yours and not mine." Pierce blinked. "Excuse me?" "He's an adult," she said. "He's cognitively intact. His care record documents that clearly. You can request to speak with him, and I'll ask him if he's willing. That's the process. But, the family has authorized a review," Maggie said. "A review of his care status, not a conversation with him. If you want to speak to Anton Voss directly, you need his consent. That's not a protocol I invented. That's patient rights, and it applies here regardless of what jurisdiction you think you're operating in." The silence that followed was about 4 seconds long, and it was the kind of silence that had a texture. She could feel Nikolai behind her without turning around. She'd become attuned to his presence over the past 2 days. In the way you became attuned to something that mattered, something you were tracking without consciously deciding to track it. He was still letting her work. Pierce looked at Chen. Chen's expression said nothing helpful to him. He looked back at Maggie. "Ask him," he said. She went to the curtain and stepped through it and pulled it closed behind her. Anton was sitting up with both hands flat on his knees, and the controlled way he was breathing told her he had heard every word of the exchange outside. He was doing the thing she'd seen him do this morning, holding himself in, keeping himself managed, not allowing anything to escape the perimeter of his body before he decided to let it. "There's a man out there who wants to speak to you," she said low and direct. "He says he's representing your family." Anton's jaw tightened. "He's representing my father." "Are those the same thing?" Something flickered in his face, dark and fast. No. Then that's your answer to give. I need to go back out there and tell him yes or no. What's it going to be? He looked at her. If I say no, does that end it? Today, she said honestly. It ends it today. They'll likely come back with additional documentation and try again. But today, your no ends it. He was quiet, processing. Nikolai's out there, right outside that curtain. He nodded once the way he'd been nodding, small, complete movements that communicated more than they appeared to. No, he said. Tell him no. Okay, she said. Maggie. His voice was different now, lower. The word had something underneath it. She stopped. Thank you, he said, he stopped, looked at his hands, for treating me like I'm a person, a regular person, not a case. She looked at him for a moment, at the 26-year-old face and the very old eyes in it, and all the things that had put those eyes on that face. You are a regular person, she said simply. That's the only kind there is. She went back out. He said no, she told Pierce. He declines a direct consultation. Pierce's face went through several things in rapid succession. Frustrations, calculation, a sharp glance at Lim, and then the settling into a specific kind of professional rigidity that meant he was about to escalate the language. That's going to complicate the family's position significantly. If the patient is declining, that's his right, Chen said from across the room because she had been listening. The patient has declined. The direct consultation component of your review is closed. We still need to assess. You have the care documentation, Chen said, walking toward them now, tablet in hand. You've been provided a comprehensive record. I've reviewed it, and it is thorough and complete and consistent with appropriate care standards. What aspect of his welfare do you believe is not addressed in that record? Pierce opened his mouth. Chen continued. Specifically, what specific welfare concern? Name it. He did not name it, because naming it would have required claiming something that was not in the documentation, and the documentation left no space for it. Maggie had made sure of that. 19 years of thorough nursing notes had never been more deliberately thorough than the ones she'd written in the past 6 hours. Lim was still watching, still writing. Pierce reached into his document bag and produced a single additional sheet of paper. He handed it to Chen with the air of a man playing a card he had been holding back. Formal request for transfer consultation, he said. Signed by the patient's father as legal next of kin requesting evaluation for transfer to a civilian medical facility better suited to the patient's long-term care needs. Chen took the paper, read it. Her expression did not change. Maggie looked at Nikolai. Nikolai was looking at the paper in Chen's hands, and something in his face had tightened. Not fear, not quite, but something adjacent to it. Something that knew what that paper meant. Legal next of kin, Chen said, still reading. Mr. Voss is claiming legal authority as next of kin. He is the patient's father, Pierce said. The patient is 26 years old, Chen said. He's not a minor. Next of kin designation doesn't carry decision-making authority for a cognitively intact adult. There are extenuating circumstances, Pierce said. He reached into the document bag again. Another paper. The patient has been evaluated in a prior care setting as having diminished decision-making capacity due to psychological trauma. That evaluation is on record. The room changed again. Maggie felt the way the ground shifted under this new piece of information, the way everything that had seemed settled became unsettled again. She looked at Nikolai. His face had gone very still, not the calm, the other kind of still, the kind before something breaks. What evaluation, she said, and her voice was harder than she intended it to be, and she didn't soften it. Prior care facilities, Pierce said, approximately 8 months ago. Documented assessment of. That evaluation that Nikolai said was conducted by a physician employed by the Voss family's private healthcare entity. It was conducted without independent oversight, without the patient's attorney present, and the patient was under sedation at the time it was administered. The room was very quiet. Pierce did not look surprised by this, which told Maggie that he already knew it, that he had known it when he walked in. The validity of that evaluation is a legal question, Pierce said carefully, not a medical one, and until it is formally challenged and overturned through the appropriate legal channels, it stands as part of the patient's medical record. Chen was reading the second document now, reading it with the careful attention of someone who was also doing the legal math in her head simultaneously. Maggie watched her read it and watched her face and tried to interpret what was there. Chen's face was very controlled and gave away almost nothing, and the almost nothing was enough to tighten Maggie's chest. "This is going to require review," Chen said finally. She looked up at Pierce. "I'm not making a determination today. You will leave this documentation with me, and I will consult with the installation's legal staff and provide a response within 72 hours. 72 hours is 72 hours, Chen said, and the two words were a wall. Pierce looked at her, looked at Hargrove, looked finally at Maggie, and that look was different from all the other looks he had given her in the past 20 minutes. This one had something in it that was not professional. Something that was personal in the way that the look of someone who has been blocked more than once becomes personal. "Fine," he said. 72 hours. He looked at Lim. Lim closed her legal pad. They walked out. The door closed, the room breathed. Maggie stood still for a moment. Then she walked to the nurse's station and sat down and put both hands flat on the counter the way she had in the medication room yesterday, and she breathed. In, out, the same way she'd taught patients to breathe during hard moments. Nikolai sat down across from her. He looked like a man who had been running for a long time and had just been told he could stop for a minute. Not that it was over, just that he could stop for a minute. "The evaluation," she said, "the one from 8 months ago." "It was exactly what I said it was," he said. "I believe you." She looked at him. "But Chen has to work with what's documented. And what's documented is a formal psychological evaluation that currently designates Anton as having diminished capacity. That's a legal instrument, Nikolai. It doesn't matter how it was obtained." "I know. Can it be challenged?" "Yes, with independent evaluation with documentation of the circumstances under which it was conducted with." He stopped. His jaw moved. "With an attorney who is not connected to the family's legal structure. Anton has one. She's been working on this for 6 months. He checked his watch. "She's going to be very interested in that second document." "Call her now," Maggie said. He was already picking up his phone. She went to Anton's curtain. She went in quietly. He was still sitting up, still holding himself managed, but the quality of his waiting had changed. He'd heard enough to know something had shifted. "They had a document," she said. She was not going to lie to him, and she was not going to soften it. "A psychological evaluation from a previous care facility. It designates you as having diminished decision-making capacity." Anton's face went very flat. "You knew about it," she said. "I've known about it for 8 months, he said. The flatness was a kind of anger. She realized the kind of anger that had been living in a person so long it had become structural. "They had me sedated. I didn't even know the evaluation was happening until it was already filed." "I know," she said. It doesn't reflect." "Anton?" She sat down in the chair beside the bed, the thing she almost never did, the sitting down that changed the power dynamic that said, "I am staying and I am listening. I know, and we are going to make that very clear. Nikolai is calling your attorney right now." He looked at her. "What can she do in 72 hours? "I don't know exactly," she said, "but she's had 6 months. I suspect she's been building toward exactly this moment." She held his gaze. "What I can do in 72 hours is give you the most comprehensive current psychological and medical assessment this unit is capable of producing. An independent assessment, on the record under my signature and the physician's signature documenting your current cognitive status and your full capacity to make your own medical decisions." Something moved in Anton's face. The crack was wider now, and behind it she could see what had been there the whole time, not just fear, not just anger, but something more exhausted than both of those. The weariness of a person who had been fighting a battle that most people couldn't see yet for so long that they had forgotten what it felt like to have someone in the foxhole with them. "You do that," he said. "I'm your nurse," she said. "This is what that means." He looked at the ceiling for a moment. His jaw worked. He swallowed once. Then he looked back at her and said, "Okay," and this okay was different from the ones before. This one came from somewhere lower in him. Somewhere real. "Get some rest," she said. "I'll be back at 6 for your evening round." She stepped back out through the curtain, and Nikolai was there, phone in hand, with the expression of someone who has just received information that has changed the shape of the situation. Voss's attorney, he said. He kept his voice down. She's been waiting for them to make a formal legal move. The first two documents of the welfare review request the next of kin designation. Those gave her what she needed to file a counter motion challenging the original evaluation's validity. He paused. She filed it 40 minutes ago, before Pierce even walked in. Maggie stared at him. She filed before they arrived. She had someone watching the access requests at the installation gate, Nikolai said. When Pierce's team requested clearance this morning, she was notified. The ghost of something, not quite a smile, but its precursor, crossed his face. She's been playing this long game for 6 months, and today is the day the other side finally committed to the move she needed them to make. So the 72 hours is actually in our favor now, he said. Every hour that passes with Anton in this unit, receiving documented comprehensive care, with an independent assessment on the record adds weight to the counter motion. She absorbed that. You knew this might happen today. He hesitated. 1 second. I knew it was building towards something, he said. I didn't know the exact shape of the day. She looked at him. But you were ready. I try to be ready, he said. It doesn't always work. She thought about the exhaustion she'd read in him the day before, about what it cost to be ready all the time for years for a person who needed someone to be ready. She thought about what he'd said, someone who has nothing to lose. Nikolai, she said. Yeah. She looked at him for a long moment, finding the right words, which was not something she usually had to search for. What you said yesterday, about having nothing to lose. I've been thinking about that. His face went careful, not closed, just careful. The difference mattered, and she could read it now. And, he said, that's not actually true anymore, she said. Is that it? He looked at her. The careful things shifted, opened slightly. No, he said quietly. It's been not true for a while. He stopped, started again. It was easier when it was true, because then there was nothing to be afraid of. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She looked at him for one more moment, and then she said, go get something to eat. Real food, not the vending machine thing you had for lunch. He blinked. How did you? I saw the wrapper in the trash when I passed the rest area, she said. Go. I need you functional for the next 72 hours. He almost smiled. Almost. You're going to keep doing this. Doing what? Taking care of everyone in the room. She picked up her chart. Occupational hazard, she said. Now go. He went. She stood at the nurse's station for a moment after he left. The room had returned to its normal rhythm equipment, beeping staff moving the layered hum of a working medical unit. On the surface, nothing was different from how it had been this morning. But everything was different. She could feel it in the way she felt the change in a patient's room before the monitors reflected it in the quality of the air, in the particular texture of the quiet. At 4:56, Reyes came to her with a look on his face that she had learned in 6 weeks to associate with something unexpected. Maggie, he said, there's a call for you, external line. The caller says he's representing the Voss family's private legal team. He paused. The senior counsel, not Pierce. She looked at him. Put it through to the station phone. She picked up on the second ring. The voice on the other end was older, measured, and carried the specific quality of someone who was accustomed to being the most powerful person in any conversation. Nurse Calloway, the man said. My name is Thomas Ardell. I represent the Voss family in a comprehensive capacity. I want to speak with you directly without military legal staff about the situation involving Anton Voss. She felt something move through her. Not fear, closer to the opposite, the adrenaline of recognition, the feeling of a situation clarifying itself. How did you get this number? She asked. We have resources, Ardell said smoothly. I'd like to be frank with you. You've been an obstacle today in a situation that you may not fully understand. The family has resources and patience and a legal infrastructure that will ultimately prevail in this matter. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to step back from a position that will ultimately prove untenable, and to do so before it has any professional consequences for you. The room was very loud, and the way rooms got very loud when she needed to think quickly. Mr. Ardell, she said, and her voice was the steadiest it had been all day. What you just described is an attempt to intimidate a medical professional away from providing appropriate care to a patient. I want you to know that this call is occurring on a military installation's phone system and may be recorded. I'd also like you to know that my professional position is not determined by outside pressure, professional consequences, or the resources of anyone's legal infrastructure. She paused. Is there a specific medical question I can help you with regarding Anton Voss's care? Silence. Goodbye, Mr. Ardell, she said. She hung up. She sat with both hands flat on the counter, breathing. Then she picked up her pen and she wrote in the nursing log at the timestamp of 4:57, received external call from individual identifying as Thomas Ardell, representing Voss family legal team. Caller made statements consistent with an attempt to influence nursing staff's patient care decisions through reference to professional consequences. Call declined, and she signed it with her full name and her clear exact handwriting, and she dated every line. She was finishing the last word when Nikolai came back through the door with a sandwich he clearly hadn't wanted to buy, and an expression that changed the moment he saw her face. What happened? He said. She told him. He stood very still while she talked. The stillness was different from his usual stillness. It had an edge to it, a tightness, the particular quality of a person who is making a significant effort not to react the way they want to react. When she finished, he said in a voice that was very controlled, he called you directly. Yes. To your station. Yes. And threatened your career. He implied consequences, she said. I wouldn't quite call it a threat, but yes. Nikolai set the sandwich down on the counter and looked at her, and his eyes were doing the thing she'd seen them do when he told Derek Halton to apologize, that absolute focused clarity that was more unsettling than anger, because anger was loud, and this was quiet, and the quiet had more weight. Maggie, he said. I'm fine, she said. I documented it. It's in the record. That call actually helped us. He called you to intimidate you, and it helped us. It's a recording on a military phone system of a civilian legal representative attempting to interfere with patient care decisions, she said. Yes, it helped us. She met his eyes. I'm fine, Nikolai. I need you to be fine too. He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved through his face that she was learning to read the layers of it, the controlled surface and the real thing underneath, and how sometimes with her, the two things were not as far apart as they were with everyone else he dealt with. After this is over, he said, not the question from earlier, something more settled, a statement with a question folded inside it. After this is over, she said. He picked up the sandwich, looked at it. This is terrible, he said. You still have to eat it, she said. He ate it. And she went back to work, and the clock moved towards 72 hours. And somewhere in the JAG office, Chen was reading documents. And somewhere in a legal office, Anton's attorney was filing motions. And in Bay 4, a 26-year-old was resting for the first time in days with something that was not quite safety, but was as close to it as he'd been in a very long time, in Maggie Calloway, who had been doing this for 19 years, and who had learned to put things in the place that was getting full, felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt like the ground under her feet was solid. She felt for the first time in longer than she could name, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The first 24 hours of the 72 passed the way difficult hours always pass slowly on the surface, and too fast underneath where the real things were happening. Maggie worked her full shift and then worked 2 hours past it because there were nursing notes to finalize and an independent psychological assessment to coordinate with the unit staff. Psychologist Dr. Osei, who had read the situation with the same speed that good clinicians read all situations and had agreed without needing the political context, explained to him that a comprehensive current evaluation was both medically appropriate and worth doing immediately. Anton sat through that evaluation the way he sat through everything, now braced, managed, but present. He answered Dr. Osei's questions in full sentences. He made eye contact. He was precise about his history and his current state, and he did not minimize and he did not embellish. And when he talked about the evaluation from 8 months ago, he did it with the flat, factual clarity of someone who had already processed his rage about it and arrived on the other side. When it was over, Dr. Osei stepped out of Bay 4 and stood beside Maggie at the nurse's station and said quietly, full cognitive and decisional capacity, no question. I'll have the written assessment to you in 2 hours. Thank you, she said. He looked at her. Whoever tried to use that prior evaluation as a legal instrument Either did not read it carefully or hoped no one else would. He paused. It was poorly constructed. It wouldn't survive a first-year psych residence review. It survived 8 months, Maggie said, because no one with credentials and nothing to lose had looked at it yet, he said simply, and walked away. She sat with that for a moment. Then she added it to the file. Nikolai came to find her at 9:47 that night, when most of the day shift had gone and the unit had settled into its quieter nocturnal rhythm. She was still at the nurse's station. He sat down across from her without asking if she was busy, which she appreciated, and he put a cup of coffee on the counter in front of her, and she appreciated that too. Chen got a call from Ardell's office, he said. They're backing off the timeline. She looked up. Meaning the counter motion filing spooked them. Ardell's team asked for an extension on the 72-hour response window. Nikolai's voice was measured, but she could hear the particular quality underneath it, the quality of a man who is allowing himself carefully to feel something good. They need more time because the counter motion exposed the evidentiary weakness of the prior evaluation, and they're now trying to find grounds to challenge the challenge. How long is the extension? Chen offered them 48 additional hours. They took it. He looked at her. Every additional hour is more documentation on record, more assessment, more evidence of consistent, appropriate care. She nodded. Dr. Osei's written evaluation will be ready within the hour. I'm adding it to the file tonight. I know, Nikolai said. He also told me. He stopped. What? He said, and I'm quoting him, that whoever put this care record together was either a very good nurse or a very good attorney. She almost smiled. Tell him I said attorneys get paid more. Nikolai looked at her over his coffee cup, and the thing on his face was warm in a way she was beginning to recognize the specific warmth of a person who was not used to being in the presence of someone who made them feel lighter and was still surprised by it every time. Go home, he said. You've been here 14 hours. 15, she said. 15 hours. Go home. Sleep. I'll be here. You were here before I arrived. I'm used to it. That's not the defense you think it is, she said. She looked at him. You should sleep too. After you leave, he said. She looked at him for a moment. That's not Maggie. His voice was quiet. Direct in the way she had come to understand was his register for things that were real, as opposed to the careful, managed register he used for everything that required management. Please go rest, not because you can't handle it, because you matter and you need sleep, and nothing is going to happen in the next 8 hours that I can't handle, and I need to know you're okay. The sentence landed fully before either of them addressed it. I need to know you're okay. She looked at him. I'll be back at 6, she said. I know, he said. She went. She did not sleep well. She slept the way she slept on the nights before a patient's difficult surgery, before a conversation she knew was coming, before any situation where the outcome mattered enough that her brain refused to fully release it. She woke at 4:30, lay in the dark for 90 minutes, and arrived at the unit at 5:58. Nikolai was at the nurse's station. He had, judging by his posture and the empty coffee cups, not slept at all. She set her bag down. You didn't sleep. I slept some. Those cups tell a different story. He looked at the cups like he had forgotten they were there. There was activity around 2 in the morning, a message from Ardell's office to the installation legal line. Chen was notified and asked me to be available. She sat down. What message? They're pivoting, he said. The counter motion effectively sealed the evidentiary challenge route. So they're shifting to a different argument. They're no longer contesting Anton's capacity. They're arguing that this unit is an inappropriate care environment for a civilian patient with his particular psychological history, and that his continued presence here constitutes a failure of duty of care. She absorbed that. They're attacking the unit, not the patient. They're attacking the care environment. Which means they're attacking the care team, she said. Which means they're attacking me. He held her gaze. The specific language Ardell's office used referenced the lack of specialized psychological support infrastructure and insufficient continuity of civilian standard care protocols. Dr. Osei is a board-certified psychiatrist, she said. Yes. And my nursing record is exceptional, and they know it, and that's why they're not attacking it directly. He paused. They're attacking the institutional environment, arguing that regardless of how good the individual care is, a military field unit is structurally inappropriate for his needs. She sat with that. She recognized a cleverer argument than the capacity angle. It was harder to counter with documentation alone because it was not a factual claim, it was a framing claim. You couldn't produce a document that proved a feeling wrong. Who makes that determination, she asked. Structurally appropriate versus not. Who decides? That's the question Chen is working on right now, Nikolai said. The answer is complicated. In the absence of a legal guardian, which they can no longer establish given the countered capacity evaluation, the treating medical team has primary authority. But there's a civilian oversight layer that can be triggered under certain circumstances that would require an independent review board. How do they trigger it? They need one independent physician to sign a statement of concern. She looked at him. Do they have one? He was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. They have a candidate, a civilian physician named Hartwell, who consults with several facilities connected to the Voss family's medical holdings. He hasn't signed yet, but Ardell's office contacted him last night. The weight of that settled in the room. If Hartwell signs, she said, how long before the review board convenes? 72 hours. And during those 72 hours, the board has authority to issue a temporary protective hold on any transfer, which sounds protective, but in practice means Anton cannot be moved without board approval in either direction. It freezes the situation. And a frozen situation with a ticking clock benefits the side with more legal resources. She was quiet, thinking, turning the problem over in the way she turned difficult clinical situations over, not looking for the clean answer because there usually wasn't one, but looking for the pressure point, the place where a small, precise action could change the shape of the whole. What does Hartwell know about Anton? She said. I don't know how much they've told him. Does he know about the prior evaluation, how it was conducted? Nikolai looked at her slowly. I don't know. Find out. She was already standing. Because a physician who is being asked to sign a statement of concern based on a patient's psychological vulnerability, if that physician doesn't know that the evaluation establishing that vulnerability was conducted under sedation without independent oversight, that's a material omission. And if Hartwell finds out after he signs, that's his license. Nikolai stood up. Something had shifted in his face, the quick recognizing shift of someone who has just been shown a door they hadn't seen. You want to reach out to Hartwell directly. I want Chen to reach out to Hartwell, she said, through the appropriate channels, with the complete documentation package, including OSE's independent evaluation and the documented circumstances of the prior assessment. She looked at him directly. Before he signs. Maggie, call Chen, she said. He called Chen. Chen listened to the proposal in the focused silence of someone taking notes in real time. When Nikolai finished, she said 3 words, give me 20 minutes, and hung up. Maggie went to check on Anton. He was awake. She had come to understand over the past 2 days that Anton's sleep was light and fractured, that he woke easily and often, and that the waking was not always a bad thing, that sometimes he was simply alert in the way that people were alert when they had learned that sleep was a vulnerability. She didn't push him to sleep more. She documented his rest patterns accurately, and she checked on him twice per night shift, and she let him set the terms. You're early, he said. Couldn't sleep, she said honestly. He looked at her. Something's happening. Yes. Tell me, she told him. Not everything, not the part she was still working through, but the shape of it. The pivot in strategy, the physician, the window they were working in. He listened with his hands flat on his knees and his jaw set, and his eyes doing the thing she'd watched them do over 3 days, that flat processing look that was not absence, but its opposite. He was more present when he looked like that than most people were when they were performing presence. My father's not going to stop, he said, not bitterly, factually, the way you stated the known properties of a physical reality. No, she said, probably not today and probably not this week. But today matters, he said, like he was working it out. Today always matters, she said. Today is the only one we have right now. He looked at his hands, then at her. When I first got here, he said slowly, I told Nikolai I didn't want to be treated by anyone. I didn't want anyone near me, he said. Anton stopped. A breath. He said he'd found someone. He said she would be different. Something moved in Maggie's chest, quietly and completely. I didn't believe him, Anton said. I've stopped believing things like that. I know, she said. You were, he said, different from the first minute. He looked at her directly. You treated me like I had the right to say no. You do have that right. I know that now, he said. I forgot it for a while. Being here, he gestured slightly, meaning all of it, the past 3 days, the bay, the unit, the whole shape of how things had shifted. Reminded me. She sat with that. Let it be real. Let it settle, didn't deflect it or make it smaller. You're going to be okay, she said, not as a pleasantry, as a clinical and human assessment delivered with everything behind it. He nodded, the small, complete nod. Yeah, he said, I think I actually might be. She checked his vitals, noted his pain level, which he rated at 2, genuinely 2, for the first time since his arrival, and walked back out through the curtain. Nikolai was on the phone. He looked at her and held up one finger. She waited. He hung up. Chen reached Hartwell, he said. She felt something move through her, and she sent him the documentation package 20 minutes ago. He called her back in 12. Nikolai's voice was careful, the care of a person managing the shape of a hope before they fully commit to it. He said he was not aware of the circumstances under which the original evaluation was conducted. He said he needed time to review the new documentation. Did he say anything else? He said he would not be signing anything today. A pause. He asked Chen to convey through official channels that he does not believe it is appropriate to use a physician's statement of concern as a mechanism for a custody transfer. The careful thing in his voice broke slightly, just slightly. He used the word custody. The word landed in the room like something significant. He knows what it is, Maggie said. He knows what it is, Nikolai agreed. She breathed, fully for what felt like the first time in hours. That doesn't end it. No, he said, Ardell will find someone else. But it takes time. And every day he doesn't have that signature is another day of documented care, another day Anton's attorney can build on. He looked at her. You bought time. Chen bought time, she said, and Hartwell had a conscience. Those are the two things that actually mattered. You found the door, he said. She looked at him. He was standing 2 feet away, and he was looking at her with the full open version of himself that she had been watching surface slowly over 3 days, the version that existed underneath the protection and the watchkeeping and the management of everything. The version that existed when he allowed it to. Nikolai, she said, yeah. When this is over, she started and then stopped because the words she'd arranged were not quite right, and she was a person who valued precision. You don't have to say it yet, he said quietly. I want to say it. He looked at her and waited. You came into a room and you did something, she said. 2 days ago. You didn't have to. It wasn't your problem. It had nothing to do with any of the things you were actually here to do. She held his gaze. And I've been thinking about what you said, about having nothing to lose. And I've been thinking that the reason you stepped in, the real reason underneath the protective instinct and the reading the room and all of it, was because you saw something and you decided it mattered. He was very still. And I think, she said, that you haven't let yourself decide that things matter in a long time. Because when things matter, you can lose them. And you decided a long time ago that you wouldn't lose anything again. The silence was complete. His jaw moved. Once. That's, he started. Stopped. That's fairly accurate, he said. I know it is, she said. I've been nursing for 19 years. I can read people. You can, he said. Something in his face was very open now, the underneath thing all the way at the surface. I'm going to ask you something, she said, and you don't have to answer today. He nodded. When Anton is safe, genuinely safe long-term, and when this assignment ends, and when you don't have somewhere to be at 6 in the morning for someone else's emergency. She looked at him directly. What do you want? The question sat between them. She watched him receive it. Watched the thing that moved through him, not the calculation, not the management, the real thing. The thing a person felt when they were asked a question nobody had asked them in so long, that the question itself was a kind of recognition. He looked at her for a long time, And then he said in a voice that was not careful or managed or controlled, just honest, I want something that doesn't require me to be ready for everything all the time. That's a good answer, she said. I want, he stopped. His jaw moved. I want to have coffee with someone without watching the door. She looked at him. That's a better one. I want, and this time he didn't stop himself. I want to learn what you're like when there isn't a crisis. Because I've watched you in a crisis for 3 days, and I think the non-crisis version of you is, he stopped again, but differently, like he was choosing the words carefully because he wanted them to be right. I think she's extraordinary. Maggie Calloway, who had been nursing for 19 years, who had learned to put things in the place that was getting full, who had been talked to like a punchline and defended herself with steadiness, and been a wall and a record keeper and a patient advocate and a strategist in the space of 72 hours, Maggie Calloway felt something in her chest open that she had not allowed to open in a very long time. Find out, she said. He looked at her. When this is done, she said, find out. He said quietly and with absolute certainty, I will. 3 days later, Ardell's office withdrew the statement of concern request. Hartwell had sent a formal letter declining to participate in what he described as a legal mechanism being used to override a patient's clearly documented autonomous decision-making. 2 days after that, Anton's attorney filed a motion to have the original psychological evaluation formally expunged from his record, citing the documented circumstances of its administration. The motion was granted 11 days later. Anton stayed in the unit for another 2 weeks. He gained 4 pounds. His pain levels dropped consistently. On the day Dr. Osei cleared him for discharge, he walked out of Bay 4 and stopped at the nurse's station and stood in front of Maggie with the particular posture of a young man who was trying to decide how to say something large in a small amount of time. I don't know how to, he started. You don't have to, she said. I'm going to anyway, he said. You told me this was my body, mine. Nobody had ever said that to me like that before. Like it was just obvious, like there was no question. He stopped. His jaw worked. I'm going to try to live like that's true. It is true, she said. I know, he said. That's new. He walked out with Nikolai beside him and Maggie watched them go, and she thought about what 19 years looked like, the full length of it all, the patients and all the rooms and all the things she'd put in the place that was getting full. She thought about all of it, and then she thought about this specific week, this specific 72 hours, this specific accumulation of moments that had found her standing in front of a curtain with documentation in her hands and her name on every line. Nikolai came back 20 minutes later, without Anton, just him. He stopped in front of her. He's with his attorney, he said. He's okay. I know, she said. He looked at her, and he was not watching the room. He was not positioned between her and anything. He was just standing there present in the specific, unhurried way of someone who has nowhere else to be. Coffee, he said. She looked at him. Not here, he said. Not the vending machine kind. Real coffee. With someone who's not watching the door. He held her gaze. With you, today, if you're... Yes, she said. He blinked. Like the speed of it surprised him. I have been watching this door for 3 days, she said. I would like very much to go somewhere and not watch a door. Something in his face shifted completely, then the last of the careful managed surface falling away just briefly, just fully, leaving only the real thing underneath. It was, she thought, the best thing she had seen in a very long time. They walked out of the unit together at 4:15 in the afternoon, and the sun was outside, and there was a place 2 blocks off base that made decent coffee and did not appear on any classified map. And Nikolai Kovac sat across from Maggie Calloway and did not look at the door once. And she looked at the man in front of her, exhausted and complicated, and carrying things that would take more than a cup of coffee to put down a man who had walked into a room full of laughing people and said, stop, who had spent years being ready for everything so that someone else could be safe, who had asked her what she meant with an honesty that stripped all the performance out of the room. She looked at him and she thought, this is where it starts. Not where everything gets fixed. Not where the hard things become easy. Not where the people who need protecting stop needing it, or the rooms stop requiring someone to stand in front of curtains. Just where it starts. The thing that matters. The thing worth losing something for. Maggie Calloway had been a nurse for 19 years, and she understood better than most people that healing was not a moment, it was a direction. A consistent, daily, sometimes exhausting choice to move towards something rather than away from it. She had been moving away from things for a long time. She picked up her coffee cup, looked at him, and she chose the other direction fully clearly with both hands and all 19 years behind her. And that was the beginning of the rest of it.